Welcome to Disenchantments and Discoveries with JD, the podcast. I'm JD, and this is my very first episode. Many of you already know me from my Disenchantments and Discoveries with JD newsletter, in which I discuss a variety of topics from my point of view as a queer, agender, neurodivergent, disabled immigrant in Portugal. I'm looking forward to doing many more interviews like this one with artists and musicians, dreamers and doers, the people who envision a better world and embody the active hope necessary to get us there. So if you like the sound of that, and you like what you hear today, please be sure to subscribe and share this podcast with like-minded folks. I'm so excited today to share a conversation with my very special friend, Pussy LeBouton, who I met several months ago in a very rustic and dimly lit basement under a tattoo parlor in Porto, where a friend had invited me to enjoy a literal underground concert. The moment I heard the raw emotion in the lyrics of their first song, Anchor, I knew I'd found a kindred spirit. It brings me great pleasure to gift my listeners with the knowledge that this incredibly talented being exists. Here's our chat.
How about we start with, your stage name,
Mm-hmm.
Pussy LeBouton. What's the
Pussy
story there, and how would you describe your presence when performing?
I think it's a bit of it's a little bit of a fuck you in that the story behind it is when I lived in Kingston upon Thames in Greater London, some 10 years ago, maybe, whatever. I was crossing the road, and it was one of those zebra crossings where you press the button. I looked at the button and I was like, Pussy LeBouton. And I was like, haha, okay, that's quite funny. So that's as deep as it is. I've heard people read into it something to do with like Louis Vuitton, I don't know what, and just makes it even more hilarious. So it's kind of an anti-name in a way, the way I see it. It's just, it's all it is just something funny. And like I think you mentioned that that association, just pressing the buttons, which again is an afterthought, but very much a valid one. There are many layers to this very deep name.
That's so deep.
It is really deep, isn't it? But that's what, it's kind of it's the essence of what I do in a way, because it's just, when you ask me, who are you? I just find these questions, like, what do you do? I find these questions so hard to answer that very often it just goes into absurdity. So that's kind of, it's an absurd name, really. That's what it is, And I appreciate that it has, then you can go into whether it's drag or not, I think in terms of presence, right? So how would I describe my presence when performing? Well, this is an interesting one, because for me, I know for some people there is a clear like demarcation between when they, they have their ordinary selves and then they put on the makeup and they put on the wig and then they do a grand show and they become someone, right? And I find it very hard to become someone, especially because my material is very personal and what I'm communicating is me. So the me that is Matt and the me that is Pussy LeBouton, I see Pussy LeBouton less as a character. It's not a character. It's just a stage name and maybe a slightly heightened version of whatever I am day to day, because it's staged. So it's just a bit more dramatic. But I don't believe in any it changes the essence or like it is not me anymore. It is that different character. It is me. Pussy LeBouton is me. Matt is me. And whatever other names I want to give myself, that is me. So I hope that. Yeah. So that is my presence when performing is just me doing my shit. It's not. Yeah. I guess. That's all I've got on this, I'm afraid.
That's fine. No, great.
Yeah.
How has your identity and experiences influenced your music, both lyrically and sonically?
I once had a Jungian therapist whom I played my material to. Bear with me, bear with me. And her observation was like, the meaning was you don't put out anything you don't believe in. And I thought that was pretty like astute in that I often ask myself why I create so little, but I think it is that I'm really focused on um, my songs being really mine and communicating something about myself rather than with Pussy LeBouton that is as personal as I can get, as opposed to, I'm playing someone else's music or I'm interpreting someone else's lyrics. Here I am just the fruits of an internal journey. It's more of an accounting of what is happening inside of me. I think that's probably the best way of putting it, is just me looking at my internal landscape, what is happening at the moment, what's my state of mind, what is pressing my buttons, as it were. And then just searching for the right words. The process will be very different. I used to be much more sit down with a dictionary, do it like the classical way, pay attention to form, make it more cerebral. And some really good material came out of it, but lately it's just been much more improv based. So, I'll put some sounds on and then I'll just see what words want to come out, and then I'll build around that through trial and error. And I think it's changed the quality, not quality in a value judgment sense, but quality in the kind of music that I make. It's changed a little bit. It feels more direct to me rather than, it's storytelling, but it's a different kind of storytelling. I think my music's always been a side project in a way. So, when I studied music, worked with choirs, worked as a teacher, worked as a performer, it's always been a case of me lending my voice to express something that whose origin is not me, right? So this has always been very clearly focused around my identity and my experiences. And I think, to me, this material is very, very deeply queer and very, very deeply gender fuck, because these stir a lot of emotion. And I think a job of a singer especially is that's the material you're working with, is the emotion, right? So that's what's worth saying to me. That's purely making a choice of, okay, this part of me is worth saying. And I think a lot of, in terms of identity and experiences, again, I would say that there is a lot of me dealing with religion, with me dealing with the intersection of religion and sexuality, and especially Catholicism, which was my experience growing up in a, I would say, strictly religious household, an intellectual religious household. But there is a lot of externalizing the traumas that I went through that were never allowed to have a name. I was never allowed to be angry publicly. I was never allowed to be out of control, So a lot of, especially on my first EP, there is a lot of very angry, raw material on there. And my first EP, there was actually quite very deliberately, I didn't auto-tune, I didn't correct many things. And it was a bit scary to release it as such, but I think it was also quite important for me. I wouldn't say this is comfortable even for me to listen back to, but I think it was a very, very important step, because I now can look at it from a bit more distance, and also because it's outside of me and other people can have different perspectives, it also enables me to look at it from a different perspective, if that makes sense. I'm no longer tied to the perspective that I had when I was making this music, because I can learn from others about it as well. And that's cool. That's what I like about making music,
Yeah, it does. And speaking of the process of making music that you mentioned you like, what is that creative process like, and what challenges or breakthrough moments would you say you've encountered in this process? So I know
Okay.
this process has been kind of different with your new EP
Very.
compared to your first one. So tell me about that.
Very. So when I talk about my latest release, which I'm very, very proud of, I really want to stress it's a collaborative effort between me and my friend Simon, aka D Prime, whom I know from secondary school and who is a wonderful producer and has a very distinct style. And I've always looked up to him and his breadth of musical interests. I'm quite a, I'm quite a, when I listen to like one thing on repeat. Sometimes I don't listen to anything, whereas he listens to a shitload of stuff. And he has a really broad knowledge, which I've always found extremely impressive. And it so happened we fell out of touch, and then I think he saw my song Sweetness online, and then he messaged me and we started talking about doing an album together. And as we started talking, part of the process was us talking about our identities. What was really incredible for me was that one of the first things he did, he was like, how should I address you? And we had a big discussion about what he is comfortable with, because obviously we speak in Polish. He's Polish, I'm Polish. So gender is very complicated in Polish. You can do the classic thing of Xing it out, which I do when I write. But then when I speak, I'm like, what do I do? I don't want to use the masculine pronoun when I speak. So he was actually like, well, I'm just going to use the feminine, because I was like, okay, my preference is no gender. Second preference is the feminine. Third preference is the masculine. So he went like, going to keep it simple. I'm just going to address you in the feminine. And by doing that, he made me much more comfortable in me talking about myself in the feminine too. And that has been, I think, key in our collaboration, absolutely crucial, because I feel seen by him. And without, I don't want to go into his story too much, but I know that there are things that he struggled to be seen in throughout his life. And there is a connection between us. That is very important, and that we talk about a lot, and that we pay a lot of attention to, which is something that I've always dreamed about, to be honest. I've been making my music alone up until now because I just haven't found anyone whom I would like to collaborate with musically, who has the skill and also the sensitivity to do something worthwhile with, and time and energy. So it's been an absolute blessing. Sorry about this big preamble, but I just needed to put it out there because...
No, that is like the breakthrough moment, isn't it? Finding and reconnecting with this person who makes you feel seen.
Absolutely.
And that helps you overcome a pretty big challenge right there.
I believe in collaborative music making, be it, even if it's a band, even if I'm the solo artist with a band, it's always the band. There's always someone producing. There's always a team of people involved in making music. Whatever you do. If you go busking with a backing track, someone made that backing track.
Right. There's no pulling yourself up by the bootstraps in music.
I've tried. I've tried. For years I've tried. I've been this, it's like, there's a meme which is like, she came looking for a hero, but no one was there, so she became one herself.
Yeah.
So my music education was basically, I need to acquire all the skills so I can be totally independent.
Yeah.
So I had to do things that I like doing, that I'm competent in doing, and I had to do things that I have to do. And now it's such a relief because Simon is such a wonderful producer and he loves it. And I fucking hate it, and he does an amazing job at it. So he put it like this, that, and obviously I studied music. I have conservatoire knowledge about like part writing and arranging and sort of harmony, music theory, etc., etc. So Simon put it this way. He said, together we make one cab driver because one of us knows how to drive and the other knows the city, you know.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's great.
This next one, you've kind of already touched on it. So if you want to add any more, or we can skip it. But as an international and multilingual music artist, have you had to face any linguistic or cultural challenges in terms of ensuring your identity and pronouns are respected?
So,
like, I know you'd been telling me about the process of figuring out how to like introduce your music to the radio stations, for example.
oh yeah, writing a bio, that's always a nightmare because you're imagining what the gatekeepers might accept or not. And then you're in a situation where how authentic can I make this? And the decision has been, for me, I've been very insistent on every bio and every form. I am describing myself as a non-binary person, avoiding the pronoun issue as much as I can. I feel that, even though it's not super comfortable, sometimes you have to look for a way of saying certain things. I don't have a problem with that because it's just a matter of practice. It's like learning a new language. It can be done. It's been a hurdle if we try to pander to the mainstream in a way. Potentially some other avenues would open that would require us to keep it down. But it's something that neither me nor Simon are interested in. So I think that it's a hurdle that, we accept that exists and we just focus on doing our shit and producing something really authentic. And then the reception of it is up to the stars, the whatever, the moon, the whatever astrology there is out there or isn't. If it happens, it happens. I would love for it to happen. I really believe in the music we're making, and we'll just keep doing it. Sorry if that was a slant.
No. I think you kind of maybe went into answering the next question though. But we'll see if you have anything else you want to say to this. How do you hope your music will resonate with listeners, particularly those who may relate to your identity and experiences?
You know that feeling like when you read a book and you're like, shit, this is about me. And you really find yourself in something. Like that is my highest artistic ambition, is to create something that comes from a place of, well, a transpersonal place. Talking specifically about trauma, if we leave aside the individualistic paradigm, we begin to recognize that every horrible thing that happened to us in some incarnation, parallel things happen to people like us. And even though the specificities of it won't be identical, that is recognizable. And I don't think it is possible to lie on stage. I always believe we can recognize fake stuff if we hear it. We might be okay with hearing fake stuff because we might not be ready to hear the true stuff. Right? And also we might not always be in a place where we want to dig that deep. One artist I really, really admire, is my just absolute goddess, is Tori Amos. And I think that she, her musical career has been about going to very uncomfortable places that make you feel things, that move you. So my hope is that I manage to speak about a pain as well as just a joy of, well, gender nonconformity or queerness or whatever, of somehow being an outsider, maybe isolation. That is new to someone. That gives someone an experience of, it touches them in a place they didn't have a name until now. I think giving names to things is very important, finding new names for things, finding like what I was talking about before, just putting it out and like having a song built around a feeling. It just somehow captures it and externalizes it. And I really just hope that this music brings relief. It thaws some things that are stuck. It generates a movement. It generates a conversation. It changes things. There we go. That's the hope. That's the hope. That's the only reason I'm doing it.
I'll skip ahead to one of the other questions because you mentioned Tori Amos being a big influence for you. What other artists or genres would you say influence your sound and your musical style?
Well, I love Bjork. I mean, I listen to really varied stuff. I go through phases. Obviously, when I studied jazz, I listened to a lot of jazz. I very much like just soft electronic music, instrumental electronic music. Brazilian music, there's a fair bit of West African drumming bands that I have listened to that I find really inspiring in their rhythmic complexity. And I also had this is something that someone I studied under, that sounds bad, but had extensive knowledge of. So that has been, that musical language is just very interesting to me, and something that I could learn a fair bit about. There'll be classical influences. So this is again using the knowledge of like tonal harmony and common practice periods, part writing, polyphony. These are the techniques that I also, as a choir arranger, I will have used writing for voices. There will be a huge influence. A lot of my music is a cappella, and a lot of my vocal arranging experience comes from working with choirs. And I sang in a variety of choirs. There was a Jewish synagogue choir in Poland. There was a gospel choir. There were two gospel choirs actually in Poland. Then there was a classical LGBT choir in London, and a bunch of others. I can't even remember. I've led, directed, and arranged for 3 choirs of my own that I started myself. So that maybe it's not a very direct answer. I mean, genres. Okay, in terms of genres, I think that's sort of another artist I love to bits is Sara Tavares, who is very sadly no longer with us as of, I don't know, a few months ago. Incredible Portuguese singer with Cabo Verdean origin, who's also gay. That was quite important, that she was someone I really, really loved listening to. And then I found out. Lorena McKennitt as well. Big fan. I'm going to see her very soon. In July.
Nice.
And then, James Blake, Radiohead. There's a beautiful singer called Seraphim, Fimm, like Seraphim, I suppose.
Clever.
Whom I found through this website, alwaysonTheRun.net. That website's been around since like the 90s, and it has the most amazing artists on it. Anthony de Johnson's as well. There's probably some big names that I love that I can't remember, that I'll just be like, how could I not have said that? But
if it's important and you think of one later, you can always be like, add this one in.
Yeah. Recording in progress. Amazing. I hope I'm just in this brief moment of lucidity / reflection. Let me just look at the question. Sorry. There we go. How do you hope your music will resonate with listeners, particularly those who may relate to your identity and experiences? I hope I didn't get too waffly about it, but I just want to like very simply just go back to it and just say like that I just hope that people like me, whatever, or the those who may relate to my identity and experiences don't feel alone. and they feel like there are more people like them because there is so much silence around it.
Yeah.
And I've experienced so much silence and isolation in my life that I don't want that for anyone. And yeah, and I just want, I want the conversation. I want things to be named. I want things to be said. I don't want for people like me to feel alone. And I want for there to be dialogue and connection. There we go.
Awesome. So I will backtrack if you want to talk about this one. How about tell me, what was your time studying music in London like, and what kind of challenges did you experience?
Okay. Doing this. Can they? I'm just wondering if they can take my degree away from me.
Well, we haven't specifically named which university it was. So,
Good point. I just won't pick up their calls. I mean, I have it as a piece of paper so they can suck it. Mixed is the answer.
Yeah.
Mixed. I would say that it felt a bit Promethean in a way. It was like getting the knowledge that I needed and wanted, and dealing with the wrath and the homophobia and the bigotry and the institution and the fossils. I would say that I was shocked after having done, I spent a few years doing a cultural studies degree in Poland. Almost did it, 2.5 years, and environmental protection out of all things for a year. Like, I have synthesized aspirin in a lab,
Wow.
Yeah. But just the what I was expecting was that this would be more like a university where critical thought is encouraged, where creativity is encouraged, where, I don't know, imagination is encouraged. And my experience was that none of this is true, that studying jazz is potentially, in my experience, was potentially even more limiting than studying classical music. So internally, people would refer to the university as Jazz Factory. There was a point where it was a 4-year degree, and the way it was structured was like the first 2 years, like you learn the history, you do your oral training, you learn about what's been before you, the way I understood it. And the second 2 years was more doing your projects, and deciding what you want to do. Where I thought, okay, this is the point where I get to like do some stuff, and I had this idea about, there is this idea by a composer called Stockhausen about, I think it's called seven octaves of transposition or something, that I heard about, which is this idea that, an octave is just something times 2. So you can, if you take something that happens a few times per second, that's like a note, that's a vibration of a note, But if something happens, every few seconds, that will be a rhythm. And then, if it happens over an hour, that would be like a song form, it would be a whole cycle. And then if you go over a year, that can be like the seasons changing. And if you go, and then you've got the planets and stuff. And then you go on a micro scale, the frequencies, as they get higher, they will become like timbre and stuff like that. So I wanted to explore this idea and do a performance that would combine some more performance arts. There was like a drama department there. And I had a very clear idea about what I wanted to do that I was super excited about. And when I presented this idea, my head of faculty laughed in my face. And from then it was, it was just about surviving. It was about, it was about just getting the piece of paper so that, I don't know, so that, well, just getting, so that I can wave it at people if I need to.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, you did it.
Thank you. It took a lot of Ritalin.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, there's another question.
Yeah.
As a neurospicy musician, how do you navigate the music industry and creative process, and what changes would you like to see in terms of
Sure.
inclusivity and accessibility?
Okay. I think saying that I navigate the music industry is an overstatement. I am more like a raft, you know. I think navigation is where you actually like have a steering wheel and a sense of direction.
Right.
With me, it's more like just,
You're like
I
a
don't,
soccer
I
ball that
don't
got loose in the river.
yes, I don't have paddles or oars or anything. It's just like flapping about. That's the experience. And it's in shallow waters as well, of like, um, um so but jokes aside, um I actually have a very limited knowledge of the music industry because I don't like the idea of the industrialization of music.
Right.
Right. So I am in many ways blissfully ignorant. I just focus, I think that possibly, and this is, I mean, I know I'm not just speaking for myself because I know either, neuro, insert neuro, this is so difficult. Um, People who have been diagnosed as autistic, who embrace that as part of their identity, um, who are amazing musicians, and it pains me to see how many incredible artists there are who, because of the way maybe they're wired, find it difficult to engage with the networking aspect of the music industry.
Yeah.
Which obviously has to do with much more than the music. It has to do with how you present yourself, how you talk, how you look, you know.
Yep.
And so when I listen to music, I'm always super interested in niche stuff that few people listen to, you know. And hold on, let me look at the second part of the question. What changes would I like to see in terms of inclusivity and accessibility? Okay, one big change I would like to see is I would like for Spotify not to fucking take my money all the time, like to pay me for the. I think what this is something we discussed with. Please, like we need to, please check with me on how to say it, but I think that the streaming industry has like just really kicked the musicians in the cooch,
Absolutely.
And it's also, I mean, I don't know how you would, I mean, how do you value art? I mean, but there has to be a way that is not, you just don't, right?
Right.
The fact that I can, spend hours and put thought and emotion and work into making my art, and that's going to be played, alongside Uncle Jerry, who has just learned to use GarageBand, and
yeah,
it's very disheartening and discouraging. I would love, I think Bandcamp is really good. I would like for more people to use Bandcamp and know about Bandcamp because I think Bandcamp does it right for artists. It's I understand why people don't use it as much because it's a bit, it's a bit harder to like make playlists and it's less customized, etc. But my dream would be for there to be, something that is as easy to use as Spotify and as good for artists as Bandcamp. And then obviously we get into like, the whole music, the whole elitism of music education in general, of having, access to, obviously I was lucky enough for my parents to have paid for my music education and I have encouraged it as well. But things like reading music notation or like music theory, that is kind of a very specialist field that now has been a bit democratized with, YouTube, etc. Although the content there is usually, if you want to get beyond a certain level, if you want like systematic training as opposed to just, beginners tutorials, that is obviously much harder to access. So I would like to see more tools for making music that are not just toys, that can teach you something about music making as you use them. It's a whole big debate, about just music education and conservatoire education that it's pretty grim. I think the situation for, especially like alternative musicians who want to question things, and they think that's pretty grim. And it's grim because of predictability, because of what monetizes is what's expected, right? And we're trying to do what's not expected.
Right.
So we kind of, commercially we're shooting ourselves in the foot. But I think we're just prepared to, live with the pain of a hole in a foot.
I feel like that kind of also leads into the next question I had, which is, given all of that you just mentioned, what advice would you give to other gender non-conforming, queer, and neurospicy artists who are trying to navigate their own journey in the music industry? Again, not liking the fact that it is an industry, but it is what we've got. So
keep the focus on what's inside of you. Listen to yourself and believe the truth that is, your story matters, what you have to say matters, your voice matters, even if it feels broken, even if it feels fragile, or even if it feels, like you're stuttering, or there are periods of silence where you can't get anything out. Always, always, always believe that what you have to say matters. Never get discouraged by not being able to do as much as you imagine you can. So if you want to write a song, but all that comes out is a sentence or a word, that is more than nothing. And honor that. Also honor the fact that if you make something and never release it because you think it's too shit, you will have still learned a great deal from that experience and will have grown as an artist. As much as you can, show yourself, because you have the right to be seen and you belong, and we need each other. And I mean, connect with me if you want to, by all means. I need you and we need you, and I believe in you, and I already have like a deep feeling of love for what you're going to create, and I am curious about what you're going to say. Whether you succeed or not commercially, don't let that influence your creativity. Don't compromise. Don't hide the thing that you really want to say for fear of it not selling.
Yeah. Sounds like really great advice for writers too.
Yeah.
Just, in general, that's really good advice for anyone whose voice is less likely to be heard, but still valid.
I think that's been like one of the biggest lessons I've learned, that thing about, even if I do little, I'm doing something. We need to tell new stories. We need to tell the gender non-conforming, neurospicy stories are just so often invisible because, well, for obvious reasons, right? And because of all the external pressures of, being like a niche within a niche or whatever. And I think that's why it's just especially important that we collaborate, that we don't feel lonely. There's an article about this, about the New York stand-up scene, where some of the queer artists were like, you know what, fuck that. We're just gonna start performing. We're gonna like start doing our own thing. They weren't trying to pander to the mainstream, and they just started doing their own thing. And then a community was formed around that new thing, and they're wildly successful. And I think that is very much the way forward, is fuck the mainstream, you know. It doesn't have to be either. It's like a mainstream big river and then there's drought all around, we can like have a stream of our own.
Yeah.
What I mean. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
I am going to see if I can collapse the last couple of questions hanging out here. One is that doozy that we've saved for the end. And I kind of feel like a lot of it's probably really just been answered over the course of this call. But you grew up in Poland. You went to the University of London. You lived there for several years, and now you've been living in Portugal for a few years. So tell me about your journey as a gender fluid queer musician, navigating these different cultural and musical landscapes. What's that been like, and how does living in Porto influence your creativity and musical direction compared to your previous experiences in other cities? I know that's a lot. So
I'll try.
And
I think sure. Possibly the reason it's difficult for me to answer this question is because I think my own gender fluidity is something. It was a process of discovery. So I don't know when you say as a gender fluid person. When I was back in Poland, I did not identify myself as gender fluid. I identified myself as gay, but that was less to do with my perception of my own gender, but it was more to do with my perception of attraction. And then I think there was there's a massive influence in me having lived in London, which is a very anonymous city. It's very hyper individualistic, which for me was just what I needed, having come from a very sort of collectivist, everyone's in your business kind of culture in Poland, very monocultural comparing to London, very Catholic, This was 2006 that I left. It's Poland's changed a great deal, but the Poland I remember was an incredibly homophobic, transphobic, misogynistic place. So the 13 years in London have really taught me that it's okay for me to be myself. And it was also interesting because speaking about language, where when I speak English in first person, I never have to gender myself. And then moving to Porto, all of a sudden I'm in a cultural context when I'm in a cultural context where I do have to gender myself. And I'm kind of realizing I'm not the same person that I was when I left Poland, So as I said, like in Polish, I will, if I feel safe, I will speak of myself in the feminine. In Portuguese, I also flip. I try to like not pronounce the suffixes, I'll exit out in writing. So when I moved to Porto, I lived in a camper van at a campsite, which was a beautiful place to be creative. It was like recovering from London because there was a forest and there was a beach and there was a lot of time, and so I could get back in touch with myself, and kind of look back, and that's where the first album, the first EP is from that period where, after the chaos of London, London for me is like, if you like have an orchestra and you like close it in a metal box inside of it, it's just so much noise you can't really hear yourself. You're just acting, you're not reflecting. So in Portugal, the pace is, I wouldn't say slow, but it's much slower and much so I do feel much more in touch with who I am, and also for economical reasons, I can afford to do a lot of body-related practices here, such as dance, martial arts, yoga, contact improvisation, which teach me a lot about myself. And I think that there is a whole big thing about gender non-conforming and neurospicy and all neurospicy people's relationship with their bodies. They're looking at it from like a non-dualist perspective of the body is the mind, and it's embodied cognition. So that is musically, I think, as well evident in my work. I think my work now is the pacing of it is different. I use fewer words. I leave more space. I let people in more. I don't feel I need to shout as much.
Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to mention in closing?
I'm very grateful to you for interviewing me. It's just so nice to have someone who's willing to listen, and I'm just like releasing that album and sharing the latest release and sharing it with people and just hearing people's feedback has been just humbling and very touching, and has made me feel like like I am being seen and I'm being listened to, and I just didn't have that for a very, very long time in my life. So I just didn't, that just brings me a very deep feeling of gratitude. And
I think that you help the people who listen to you feel seen, and speaking for myself, I'm excited to help share you with the world. To help more people feel seen. Like, I think what you're doing is really, really important, and I'm excited to be able to be a part of that in getting you out there. So
thank you so much. That it really, really, really means the world to me. Honestly, I can't. I went through periods of like what just couldn't sing, wouldn't, because of externals, like economically, I just wasn't doing very well, or like I was ill or was too depressed. I know that I honestly, I'm unwell when I don't make music. It's I can't not do it.
I understand that.
And so it just brings me, it brings me joy. It is a new feeling. I always compare it to like, when you like have a forest after the rain, there's like a clearing and there's like a boulder, and then you lift it and there's all those critters like just scuttering away.
Hill bugs
that's kind of, I still feel like a bit like that when seen and when heard and when recognized, like
skitter.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I sense that it is vital for me not to skitter and just shine,
Well, shine on, my friend. That was Pussy LeBouton, whose new EP, Hold, is available in all the usual places. I'll drop their link tree below. I hope you'll check it out. And I hope you, dear listeners, feel seen, feel loved, and believe that you have something to say. Get out there and shine.
So put your guns down and fuck your discreetness. Give me the sweet.